Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day. A date that will live, well, I would say pretty much in infamy. I think that was pretty well stated. Okay. Yes. So good morning, everybody. It is Pearl Harbor Day 2021. President Biden has already been out to the World War II memorial. He was out there in the early morning hours. It's cold out, too. Something that, I assume at some point during his 4 years, Donald Trump made it to some place for Pearl Harbor Day. Not an early riser in terms of getting up and getting out of the house, I don't think. Most people's recollection is that he would show up at the office sometime around 10 or 11. But there was always the early mornings up in the residence anger tweeting. So there was plenty of that. He was up, he just wasn't going anywhere. So refreshing to see a change in that sense. Not really what we need to focus on today. Today, of course, being a Tuesday, we anticipate our Tuesday visit with Joan McCarter, but that comes later in the show. In the meantime, of course, 45 minutes to an hour on Bluetooth and what Kamala Harris as vice president, apparently that's a story. I don't even know why I acknowledge having seen it, but it did happen. Somebody reported. I don't even know whether the reporters who covered it, and of course it was for Politico, I think, they got a lot of flack about it on Twitter, and, deservedly so. Although I'm not certain how serious they were in covering it in terms of boy, everybody needs to be talking about this. I think it was kind of more along the lines of, I found this thing out about an interesting person and it's kind of wacky and we thought we'd have fun with it. But it's Politico and it's difficult to imagine them doing it for any other reason other than lodging some political score or another. Scoring points, I don't know for who, nobody knows. But at any rate, seems kind of interesting, I don't know, to them. Although, why no one ever tweeted anything out from Politico like the former guy, when he was president of the United States, paints his face orange every day and tells us he's just tan, even though he's not tan around his eyes or evenly across his face or in a color that counts as skin tone. I mean, as I've said before on the show, I'm trying to popularize it. We're talking about he painted his face like I'm going to the Broncos game orange, not even bronzer orange. And he was using bronzer of some kind too. I don't know. Anyway, I don't know why they never noticed that or talked about it in the same way. I'm sure they noticed it. And it made the news. I'm sure we can find some mainstream news media reports about it. I just wondered about why that was never more of a topic of conversation. If you're going to talk about the fact that Kamala Harris prefers wired earbuds to Bluetooth wireless ones for various reasons. I don't know. I mean, I guess you could spend some time trying to determine the validity of the supposed security risk issue that she thinks. But, at this point, it's like, why not just chalk it up to she doesn't think they work very well and she wants the wired ones, and what's the damn difference? I don't know. But anyway, the internet is aflame with that this morning, and I think we could probably turn our attention elsewhere. As a matter of fact, we could read Bill's morning tweet and get a totally different idea. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. For one thing, we should be paying attention to that, I think. And he goes on to say, look, I don't think it's appropriate that Kagro should gloat about the Patriots beating the Bills last night. Oh, okay. I probably won't spend much time on that, too. But who are we to stop him? Just we villagers, my friends. Just we villagers. All right. Just so long as you don't tie me down Gulliver's Travel style, I guess we'll be okay. And we can roll forward. What is on the agenda for today? Well, let's see. First of all, we did the Bluetooth thing. Second of all, we'll do this. So whether it's a matter of should or not, I don't know. Devin Nunes getting set to make his exit from the congressional stage. I guess did he get a job with the new Trump startup thingy, the sixth or seventh attempt at having a Trump media or a Trump social media platform, slash who knows what else it is. We actually could spend some time going back over what his plans are for that. We discussed it early on when it was first announced. Disparaged it appropriately, I think, but there's some more writing on the subject that might reveal some new information about it, or at least update us on how that effort is going to raise the money for that. But yeah, Darwin makes note of this as well early in the morning, and just a nice little tweet to me here. Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. He's gone. So Devin Nunes says not only will he be retiring and not standing for re-election, but that he plans to leave Congress by the end of the year. As you may recall, some minutes ago, I mentioned that it was December 7th, which means that there's not much time left. So what are we talking about? In 20-something days, he'll be gone. I mean, they'll be in recess by that point. So, there's only about 3 weeks left of Devin Nunes in Congress, which is a great thing. I mean, it's fantastic that he's leaving. And I don't know whether they'll get around to having a special election to fill his seat in early December or not. I guess in California they probably could get their act together to go ahead and do that. I don't know what the results are likely to be, but it's nice to be rid of Devin Nunes, even if it means he'll be over at someplace else grifting off of Donald Trump. But let Donald Trump worry about paying the guy for a while, and not us. He prostrated himself before Trump for years, and I guess he did so in the hopes that he'd one day get a big payoff, and I guess this is it. We'll see whether it works. It should work out pretty well for Trump in that he can grant the job. He has the power to, make him happy and grant the job, but doesn't actually have to pay him out of his own pocket. I guess it comes out of the pockets of this new investment vehicle that's fueling the new social media venture. Okay, well, let's see. Short tea break here. We're just going to have to do that. It's cold enough that we really require this morning. It helps keep the throat in shape the best we can. Younger son home from school today, unfortunately. Looks like after the show, post-production time is going to be me over at the urgent care checking him for strep throat, or, having someone. I'll have my people do that, you see. My people being the people over at the urgent care thing, who will charge me something in the neighborhood of $125 to do that, I think. But okay, these are the things we go through. It's a tough thing today. It's cold out there, and I think the change in weather, and the quick change in weather, is doing this to a lot of people. All right, let's see. What other things do I have at the ready to share with you this morning? There are a couple of things. Let me follow up by going over to Judd Legum's Popular Info newsletter to bring up the latest on Trump's new media company. As I said, we mentioned a little bit a couple of weeks ago what was going on with this. He has, he's been trying to start up a new social media platform to substitute for Twitter since he's been banned from Twitter for some time now. Although it's funny, someone's going to commit all this money to this stuff, and I have a feeling in all of the rumors swirling about the founder of Twitter, Jack, was it Dorsey, taking off and departing from the company and new leadership coming on, and I guess between that and people complaining about the weird new rules about private media and sharing photos and people getting banned for it, and even doing for things getting banned or being put in Twitter jail for things they tweeted years ago. If the right-wing antagonists can get together enough of a coordinated reporting program, people have been speculating that the new leadership at Twitter might be looking to pave the way for reinstating Donald Trump to the platform, probably in anticipation of his 2024 presidential bid, if he should live so long. I'd rather he not, but, it's not up to me. But maybe, I don't know, whether they have plans about having him in place ahead of the 2022 elections so that he can weigh in on those. I think it would be best if they did not, but they might be contemplating this. It would be funny if they did that and undercut the reason for his having formulated this whole new venture in the first place and then having it collapse. But whatever, we'll see. It won't be his money lost, so the pain won't be great enough for me to take an interest in it. Just point and laugh. Anyway, Judd has something new on this from a couple hours ago. Trump's new media company is a $1.6 billion mirage. That sounds about right, and comports with our understanding of what was going on. Let's see what he's got for us this morning on this front. In October, former President Trump announced the creation of a new company, Trump Media and Technology Group, TMTG. Its signature product is a new social media site, Truth Social. According to an investor presentation, Truth Social and the larger company will be, quote, a fountainhead. And that's kind of, I'm just looking at his hair as we say fountainhead. It's kind of funny. Be a fountainhead of support for American freedoms as the first major rival to big tech, which is ridiculous, of course, because, $1.6 billion is pretty big tech. And, of course, even his definition of big tech didn't make any sense anyway. But fountainhead of support for American freedoms as the first major rival to big tech, TMTG will, quote, even the playing field of a media landscape that has swung dangerously far to the left. No more ridiculous statement necessary than that. Initially, TMTG suggested that Truth Social was based on, quote, proprietary technology. It was later forced to admit that, well, it was proprietary technology. It was somebody else's, I guess. It was code taken from Mastodon, an open source decentralized social network that anyone can use. So I guess in that sense, it's not even really proprietary at all. It's just you're not allowed to, they do retain some rights in it over at Mastodon. You're not allowed to use it without their permission for rebuilding your own stuff. I guess without some acknowledgement of their having built the platform. Anyway, we'll see. They were upset about it, and we know that much. Let's see. So they were later forced to admit that the code was taken from Mastodon, right? Open source decentralized social network that anyone can use. Gab, an existing social media network geared toward the far right, already uses Mastodon. So neither the technology nor the concept is new. So all they're willing to say, all Judd's willing to say here is that they were lying about it being proprietary from their perspective, at any rate. TMTG promised that Truth Social plans to begin its beta launch for invited guests in November of 2021. It is, of course, again, December 7th, 2021 right now. So November 21 came and went without a beta launch or any update from the company. No surprise there. The Truth Social homepage is a single static page that collects email addresses. TMTG was also subject to criticism for failing to announce, quote, anyone involved in building its supposed technology, unquote. And that is a link, I guess, to the reporting from Bloomberg on that subject. The only people identified as involved in the company's operation were Trump and Scott St. John, a game show producer, okay, why not, that will supposedly be involved in TMTG's streaming service, TMTG Plus, which is supposed to launch sometime in 2023. They already have a plus. There's no actual TMTG, no TMTG Prime, per se. That is to say, not Prime like as a additional Prime service. That's a bad choice now that Amazon uses the Prime. But the original TMTG, in mathematical terms, Prime. But okay. Anyway, they got a plus already. An updated version of the TMTG investor report lists a technology team, but the members of the team are identified only by their first names and last initial. TMTG's chief technology officer is Josh A. Who is Josh A? He may have worked for Apple or Little Debbie Snacks or Cab. We don't know. That's the way Judd puts it here. TMTG does not specify. The technology team, TMTG warns, is, quote, subject to change. But don't worry, if Josh A. departs for greener pastures, TMTG can rely on their chief product officer, Billy B. That could be Billy Bush. You don't know. Anyway, on Monday, TMTG announced that Congressman Devin N., I guess we would call him, will be retiring from Congress to become the company's CEO in January. Nunes has no experience in the media business and once sued a fictional cow for making fun of him on Twitter. That's qualification enough, I would say. Writing in Bloomberg, Matt Levine concludes there is, quote, almost no sign that TMTG is actually building a social network or a streaming platform or anything else. Nevertheless, TMTG projects 121 million monetizable users and $3.6 billion in revenue by 2026. In 2021, it more conservatively projects $1 million in revenue, and their projection chart is included here. Will TMTG's rosy predictions come true? It seems unlikely, very unlikely, he says. But critically, Trump does not have to meet those projections or even stand up a real company to make lots of money, which is probably what was so attractive to him. Just a few weeks after TMTG launched, it announced that it was merging with Digital World Acquisition Company, DWAC, which is a publicly traded special purpose acquisition company, or SPAC. Everybody's got an acronym today, SPAC. A SPAC, and I'm hoping they actually say it that way out loud, also known as a blank check company, you'll remember this from our update a couple of weeks ago, is formed specifically to merge with another company and take it public. In this case, investors in DWAC would pay Trump $293 million in exchange for 18 to 25% of TMTG, which doesn't really operate yet as a business. Prior to merging with TMTG, a share of DWAC was valued at $10. Shortly after the merger was announced, DWAC stock, perhaps buoyed by Trump fans, was trading as high as $175 per share. It has since settled in around $43, which still values TMTG at almost $1.6 billion. That's not bad for a company that has no product, no users, no publicly identified executives, and no revenue. It is trading at $43 because that is what people are willing to pay for it. TMTG has not completed its merger with DWAC or made associated securities filings, but if the deal closes in the first quarter of 2022, we're about 3-4 weeks away from that, Trump and DWAC investors are likely to make a lot of money. Trump will get the proceeds from the initial deal, and the investors will be able to realize a return by selling their shares. Trump will collect his money long before anyone figures out if TMTG is a real company, much less a profitable one. Did you know that the SEC has questions about it? In its initial SEC filing, DWAC represented that it had, quote, not selected any specific business combination target, and we have not, nor has anyone on our behalf, initiated any substantive discussions, directly or indirectly, with any business combination target. Multiple media outlets, however, reported that DWAC CEO Patrick Orlando and Dawn was involved in discussions with Trump months before DWAC began trading. The SEC is now seeking information about DWAC's trading policies and communications between the SPAC and Mr. Trump's company. Yeah, mixed messages there, and the SEC will want to get to the bottom of it. If the investigation determines that the deal between DWAC and TMTG was agreed to in advance, DWAC's SEC filing could be considered false or misleading with respect to a material fact. That could be in violation of federal securities laws. The SPAC deal, if it's completed, will earn Trump $10 a share, but the company is currently trading at over $40 a share. How does Trump capture even more of that cash as soon as possible? While the merger is pending, a SPAC and its target have the ability to privately sell more shares to raise capital. This is called a private investment in public entity. A private investment in a public entity, I guess, or, yeah, you guessed it, a new acronym, private investment, P-I, in public entity, P-E, PIPE. How do you like that? Unless it's PPA. Well, probably PIPE, but That's just an invitation to all sorts of bad, I don't know what. Never mind. On Saturday, TMTG announced a $1 billion PIPE investment. These shares will be purchased at substantial discount from the current retail trading price. That means Trump, before TMTG has a single product or subscriber, could collect $1.3 billion. Wow. I don't think I understood that now that I think about it. Let's see. If the SPAC deal is completed, Trump gets $10 a share, currently trading at $40 a share. How to get that money? All right. They have the ability to sell more shares. Okay. All right. Well, at any rate, who is investing $1 billion in Trump's virtually non-existent company? TMTG does not say. It doesn't matter. It's China. It's Saudi Arabia. It's Jared Kushner. I don't know. Probably not. But who, let's see. They identify the source of the cash as, quote, a diverse group of institutional investors. That's it. The identity of the investors is critical in light of Trump's future political ambitions. He may run for president again in 2024. What if, for example, the investors included the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund? The answer is nothing. For you or me, doing that would land us in a world of trouble and possibly in prison. For Donald Trump, it's just, hey man, it's probably wrong, but what are you going to do? He's been shady his whole life. And that's kind of how it'll go. The structure of the PIPE deal, however, suggests that these investors are less interested in influencing a future president than fleecing retail traders for a quick buck. Levine notes that typically in SPAC mergers, the PIPE investors can't sell their stock the day after the merger closes. Rather, the PIPE investors need to wait a couple of months. In this case, however, DWAC and TMTG have promised the PIPE investors that they'll be able to freely resell their stock the minute the merger closes. So I guess it's usually just a private agreement that they can't do that. There's no SEC rule about that. In other words, there seems to be a real push by these investors to flip these stocks immediately. The investors, whoever they are, seem to be keenly aware that time is not on their side. They want to be able to cash out before anyone gets too much information about how the company actually performs. It's a deal that makes Trump money and the investors money. The people holding the bag will be retail investors paying premium prices for a mirage of a company because they like Trump. I might be perfectly happy to do that. That group, by the way, includes Marjorie Trader Green, who bought between $15,000 and $50,000 worth of DWAC on the day it announced its merger with TMTG. She paid somewhere between $67.96 and $175 per share. That means she's probably already lost about half of her investment and possibly a lot more. But she's probably cheering about it now because, it makes her happy, I think, to know that money is leaving her pocket but going into Donald Trump's pocket. And because she's a stupid person. And I guess, but as long as it makes her happy, there won't be any case filings about it. It's the angry people who you have to look out for. The ones who are happy to give their money away to Donald Trump, there's nothing you can do about that. All right, well, at any rate, that seems like an interesting entry on the ledger for today. Just a few minutes remain before our first break. And, still lots to catch up on, so maybe we'll just dive into various other things and see how much we can squeeze in before the break. Maybe we'll do this. In one of the stories occupying a lot of time and bandwidth yesterday actually turned out to be, I think, more or less maybe a little bit of an update from reporting that we heard back in February of this year, but a lot of attention paid yesterday afternoon to a New York Times piece, bylined here for Maggie Haberman and Noah Weiland, unless he's Wieland. I think he's Weiland, Weiland, you know who I'm talking about, but how do you pronounce it? I don't know. Anyway, the headline here being Trump's blood oxygen level in in COVID bout. I guess I'm having one now myself. Trump's blood oxygen level in COVID bout was dangerously low, former aide says. This, I guess, is what's supposed to pass for the latest excerpt or scoop from Mark Meadows' book, but it actually looked fairly familiar to me. I felt like we had already seen this and some of the other supposed revelations. And in fact, we had, and I don't know whether they make mention of it because I haven't read this article yet, but maybe we'll read through it, whether they make mention of the fact that they actually reported most of that already back in February, Haberman and Weiland. They were joined, I think they had two other writers on the byline that time, but I dug it up and found it, and I'll show it to you later on. But back in February, they told us most of this stuff. Here's the deal, to use that old phrase again. President Donald J. Trump's blood oxygen levels sank to a precariously low level after he announced that he had tested positive for the coronavirus last year, later than he should have announced it. According to that Meadows book, new details contradict Trump's denials this year that he had COVID, or that his COVID bout was more dire than the White House medical officials had acknowledged at the time. But once again, that was the gist of the February article. Meadows' book, you know about it already, goes on sale Tuesday, so that's today. So rush on out and get one, I guess. Don't. Steal one, I suppose, is a better idea. He describes his tenure in the White House, alternately promoting Trump's false claims that the 2020 election was stolen from him and attacking the news media, which is always a fun thing to do. Mr. Meadows, though he's an attacker, gets the Mr. Although revealed previously undisclosed details about the former president's medical condition in October 2020. Let's see. We can sneak in maybe one more paragraph. Trump, who has long been fearful of appearing weak, has tried to camouflage those details. The White House staff and members of his medical team aided in that effort, publicly downplaying how sick he was at the time. The former president denied a detailed New York Times report this year that he was more ill than his aides had revealed, and we'll talk about more after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Phew, let's continue to learn what we already learned and marvel at the fact that we're being told that we're learning it again over here from the New York Times. Let's see, we left off by saying the former president denied a detailed New York Times report this year that he was more ill than his aides had revealed, with depressed oxygen levels and lung infiltrates. Am I pronouncing it right? Or do they have some weird pronunciation of what looks like infiltrates? Which occur when they are inflamed and filled with fluid or bacteria. It tends to happen. Look, well, within that sentence, where we say here the former president denied a detailed New York Times report this year, they refer back to that February piece that I mentioned to you, and now we can go back and give you the date, February 11th, and tell you who the other writers on the byline were. Mark Mazzetti and Annie Carney were the others on that one. And I had the feeling, as I was watching people tweet about this thing and saying, I think I noticed Brian Beutler just saying, hey, I didn't know that Trump actually got Regeneron, or one or the other, I think it was the Regeneron monoclonal therapy, at the White House before he went to Walter Reed. And I could see, people forgetting that we had learned this, but we did in fact learn it from this February article. I don't know, you'd think they'd have been more explicit, but they were just sort of slyly showing you that they already reported this stuff. I think they would want to grab more credit for that. But anyway, yeah, we did hear about that, and I was pretty sure I had heard that he was maintaining a stash of Regeneron at the White House at the time, and that even after he finally did leave the White House, there was some left behind, and we weren't ever really told what happened to the Regeneron they were keeping in a refrigerator in the White House, whatever White House medical facilities they have. Anyway, turned out to be the case. I did remember it correctly, and it did come from the New York Times, so I don't know. You'd think they'd be trumpeting that a little bit more. Anyway, Mr. Meadows recounts in extraordinary detail how severe Mr. Trump's illness was. On Friday, October 2nd, 2020, hours after the president announced on Twitter that he had tested positive for the virus, he recorded a blood oxygen level of about 86%, Meadows wrote. That is roughly 10 points below what would be considered normal. Most healthy people have a blood oxygen level of about 95 to 98%, although some people may have lower normal readings. Don't panic if you're one of those people. Mr. Trump's health had deteriorated so much. How much did it deteriorate? It deteriorated so much that I tweeted that there should never be any state funeral for Trump. And, well, people didn't like that very much. Got me in a lot of trouble. Anyway, there really shouldn't be, and I think that that's a non-controversial point of view now, but we hadn't had an insurrection yet. He hadn't tried to steal the election just yet. And we had only, I guess we should say, had only killed about, a mere 250,000 or so with coronavirus by that point, even less. So people didn't know how correct it was to say whether he dies right now of COVID or, for that matter, right now of COVID. Let's say Omicron or Delta or whatever, breakthrough infection, or falling down the stairs or being run over by a steamroller or whatever. I don't know. There should be no state funeral for Trump. And by the way, the fact that there is one ongoing and for Bob Dole, lying in state, I think maybe even currently, in, or I don't know, could that have happened? Did he die yesterday? He couldn't be there already, could he? I don't know. I thought I read something about it yesterday. Anyway, I can find the details of it if they're available. But he'll be lying in state in the Capitol Rotunda. And I'm sure Trump sort of envisions that for himself and laughs thinking about how he sent people to attack the Capitol Rotunda. But I don't know. I suppose if he would like to lie in state where his followers at one point in time smeared feces on the wall, I suppose that's a better way of thinking of it than the fact that we're all being very poorly served by the idea of his lying in state. But anyway, there's still time to prevent that from happening. Anyway, let's see. His health had deteriorated so much that day that members of his medical team feared they would not be able to treat him adequately without immediate attention from hospital staff. That morning, Dr. Connolly pulled me aside. Remember, Connolly had since replaced Ronnie Jackson, who I mistakenly thought was still the White House physician at the time that Trump was stricken with COVID. And happy to continue to blame him for it anyway, despite the fact that it's not true. But we're in a post-truth era now, and by my reckoning, my insisting that Ronnie Jackson is responsible, I think lands me a gigantic radio contract, and I make millions of dollars. I haven't seen that come to fruition yet, so I might have to just lie about it some more so that we can get around to it. On the other hand, I will point out that technically speaking, that might be medical misinformation. So, we'll see what YouTube has to say about it. They emailed me yesterday, by the way, to tell me that the thing that they emailed me about the other day as being final was in fact final. I don't really know what the notification was supposed to be for the second time, but yes, the November 25th, 2021 episode of the Kagro in the Morning Show is now, I guess, a collector's item. You can still download it at Libsyn, by the way, and probably 100 other places as well, just not YouTube. And I don't know how many of you were downloading from YouTube, but if you were and you missed it, you might not know you missed it because it was a Thanksgiving episode. You might have just thought we took the day off. So trade them among your friends, I guess. You can still find it elsewhere. And if you're really looking for it and you can't find it, email me and I'll tell you where you can find it. And I'll tell you where you can put it once you've got it. Anyway, let's see. Where were we? Oh, yes, right. That morning, Dr. Connolly pulled me aside. We're talking about Mark Meadows here. And delivered some bad news. Really? What was the bad news? Because the way I read it, it was great news. But let's see. This was Meadows in his book referring to Dr. Sean P. Connolly, C-O-N-L-E-Y. I guess I have that wrong. Connolly, not Connelly. The head of Mr. Trump's White House medical team. Great job there, by the way, Sean. Although the president's condition has improved slightly overnight, his oxygen levels had now dipped down to about 86% and could be trending lower, a dangerously low level for someone his age. I was going for 0, but we never made it, alas. Mr. Meadows wrote that Mr. Trump's Mr. Doctors, I'm just going to throw Misters in front of everybody, had decided to put the president on Mr. Oxygen in the residence and hope for the best. Okay. Mr. Oxygen sounds like a product I could probably bring to market. When it was clear he would need outside care, Trump's medical team made the case to Meadows to intervene because he's a doctor or something. We don't have the resources to do it here, Dr. Connolly told Mr. Meadows about the president's condition. I worried that the notion of him going to the hospital, in his mind, would seem like an act of capitulation, Meadows wrote. I was right. Except, Trump will say, no, you were wrong, and then Meadows will say, it's true, I was wrong. So what's the point, really? I don't even know why I'm reading this. He described walking into Trump's private residence to see him in a T-shirt, Mr. T-shirt, sitting up in bed. It was the first time I had seen him in anything other than a golf shirt or a suit jacket, Meadows wrote. Fascinating. The president, he said, was making phone calls and trying to work. Wow, what a difference. If it hadn't been for the oxygen tank by his side, that's Mr. Oxygen, I might have forgotten that he was sick at all, Meadows wrote, because I'm so aware of, I'm chief of staff for the president of the United States, leader of the free world, and I might have forgotten that like hours ago we thought he was going to possibly die, but luckily I didn't, because there was his Mr. Oxygen, trademark, oxygen tank there keeping him alive. Anyway, what else did he say? His attention snapped back to Trump's appearance. I remembered what Dr. Connolly had said. We were in trouble, and the president needed to get to the hospital, and I had left him there. Trump had red streaks in his eyes, Meadows recounted, and his hair was a mess from the hours he'd spent getting Regeneron in bed, referring to an antibody infusion the president had received, and not a porn star named Regeneron or Regenerana or anything like that. I just like the way they put that. His hair was a mess from the hours he'd spent getting Regeneron in bed. She was very difficult, and she required at least $200,000 to do it. So that's what came to mind for me. Maybe it was different for you. The president was initially resistant to leaving the White House and told Meadows that he was going to be fine. Oh, God, they should have taken his advice. Meadows, how dare you? Meadows intensified his pleas. It's better that you walk out of here today under your own strength, your own power, than for me to have to carry you out on a gurney in 2 days, he recounted. Not that he was going to be doing any of the carrying. Trump relented, and this is a new-ish thing, I think. I don't know if it's in the February piece. On the walk out to his helicopter, he had lost so much strength that he dropped a briefcase he had planned to carry outside, where reporters were lined up to observe him, Mr. Meadows recalled. And he probably really just, I don't know whether it was the strength or he dropped like, I've never carried a briefcase in my life. Or else it was like, this briefcase looks gigantic next to my tiny hands. I'm not going to do anything to call attention to my hands. And also, I don't read anything anyway. And, Meadows at that point said, well, it's not like we put papers in your briefcase. It's full of Play-Doh, something for you to do while you're in the hospital. But, and he probably was like, Play-Doh, I want my color forms. And just chucked the thing. A spokeswoman for Mr. Trump did not respond to an email seeking a comment, but who would care about a comment about that? Got the news. Last week, The Guardian obtained a copy of Meadows' book and revealed that Trump had first tested positive for the coronavirus on September 26th, 2020, 3 days before his first presidential debate with Joe Biden. Mr. Meadows has criticized reporters for focusing on that test and not the negative result from a different test a short time later, which was obviously wrong. So, I don't know that's why they're focusing on the right one. It's pretty famous. He had COVID. So it's kind of like, yeah, get over it. Oh, look at that. I was just glancing up at the date and time, and it said December 7th, and it's 9:41. which, if you look at it quickly, you'd think was 1941, and all of a sudden I got all nervous, like, oh my God, I've traveled back in time to an era that has both Pearl Harbor happening at the moment and this Apple laptop in front of me. And, I got upset that I might be in some sort of alternative timeline movie, and I hate those, and I just think just stick to the timeline we're at. If you're going to do your time travel, alternate Earths, it just seems so trite, but what do I know? I'm sure you could do it well. Anyway, where were we? Oh yes, Mr. Meadows criticized reporters for focusing on the fact that Trump had a positive test and also happened to be, shortly thereafter hospitalized with COVID. So don't focus on that. Focus instead on the false negative we got later on. But, of course, it's part of his case, right? So Trump has tried to make the same case, insisting that Meadows had affirmed that he was not sick before or during the debate because they got a false negative. But at the time, I guess, with him not yet in the hospital and not yet struggling to breathe, if those are in fact true facts about the situation on the ground, you might have concluded, you would have been able to say, well, I conclude that it was a false positive earlier, as opposed to this being a false negative. But at this point, it's pretty stupid to be arguing that the test you should be focusing on is the negative one. On October 1st, 2020, Trump revealed that he was taking a coronavirus test after news reports that his aide, Hope Hicks, how does she do it? Very poorly at that point and with very little strength, because she had tested positive. Although the president implied that it was Ms. Hicks who had infected him, probably not a smart idea, Meadows wrote that it was clear to him that Trump was already significantly ill that night. I've lost so much strength, Mr. Meadows quoted Mr. Trump as telling him, adding, the muscles are just not responding. By then, Meadows had arranged for a monoclonal antibody therapy made by Regeneron to be secretly delivered to the White House. Even there, he's probably grabbing too much credit for it. My recollection is from the February articles that Jared Kushner had already claimed credit for being the one who had arranged to get the therapy to the White House. But, Kushner's not likely to speak up and insist that it was him at this point. So there we go. He said the company's chief executive, Leonard S. Schleifer, Schleifer, let's see. He asked the company's chief executive for 4 doses, mentioning that Hicks and Melania Trump, the first lady, that Hicks is the first lady, Melania Trump is, his wife, had tested positive. Meadows did not reveal who else might have needed it. He wrote that a senior aide had orchestrated a special authorization to land a small jet at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, where the doses would arrive and be ferried to the president. Food and Drug Administration officials cleared the treatment for Mr. Trump, even though it had not yet been authorized by the agency. That was the bigger of the two administrative tricks, by the way, because, quite honestly, I don't know. Do you want to spend any time looking into this? I mean, I won't, but hint to reporters, the idea that Meadows says in his book that he orchestrated, or a senior aide, I guess at his direction, you see, orchestrated a, quote, special authorization to land a small jet at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. None needed. Honestly, I mean, I don't know if you know this, but jets land at Reagan Airport all the time. Even small ones do. I mean, small planes of all sorts. I don't think you need any special authorization to land a small jet. They make it sound that way, like small jet. Oh, well, a private one, you got to make special arrangements. No, you don't. Not at all. I personally have landed, not at Reagan, to be sure. And maybe they have some different rules there because it's so close to the White House. There's nothing that says small jets can't land there or anything like that. But maybe, I don't know, it might have been making some sort of special approach to Washington, which isn't normally allowed in order to save time, but I doubt it. Anyway, it just sounds like puffery to me. But I personally have landed not in a small jet, but in a single-engine 5-seater propeller plane at Dulles. So, we didn't need any special permission there either. It's just not a thing. Special permission for a plane to land of any kind at Reagan. But anyway, what else did they say here? We rigged the 4-poster bed in the president's room so that he could recline and take the drug, that is to say Regeneron, while he was still alert and giving orders. Oh yeah, he was ordering. It's just like the Ronald Reagan sketch from Saturday Night Live. Trump's condition after he was hospitalized was still grave. After he was moved to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda, Mr. Meadows asked for an update from one of the president's doctors about his condition. See, that's me doing my official duty. Give me an update. There, snap to it. The Regeneron treatment we'd given him was working, they said, but his oxygen levels were still dangerously low. Judging by the details he gave me, it was clear that the staff at Walter Reed was prepared for a long stay. Weeks, maybe longer. But his super strength and great genes kicked in. It's a big setup, as you can see. He wrote that every moment was difficult for Mr. Trump. Every few minutes he would need to sit back down and rest. At one point during the president's stay, Meadows tried to surreptitiously tell reporters that the situation was more dire and was caught on camera. Trump erupted in anger, according to people who spoke with him. He didn't have the strength to erupt in anger, but he did anyway, because that's just how valiant a fighter he is. Within days, and with the help of a cocktail of other drugs, Trump was back at the White House with aides fearful that he might still have been contagious, and he was. And he gave it to plenty of people and ripped his mask off to do it. So anyway, that's the end of today's reporting. The link is back to the February piece in case you need to search it out. You just can't wait. Trump was sicker than acknowledged with COVID-19 was the headline back on February 11th, 2021. I don't know how lengthy. It's not a terribly lengthy article, but I suspect, quite honestly, that the book reveals next to nothing more than we had already learned by February. It's not a particularly good use of our time on the air to compare those two articles side by side out loud, but it's something you might want to do on your own, and I might do after the show just to convince myself that it was worth telling you to do it. All right, what other things have we to share with you? There are many. Let's see. Do I want to go further back in time or do more of the latest stuff? How about we jump back in time a little bit and discuss this one? This was one I thought about bringing up yesterday and didn't, but it's been sitting around for a while. From Politico, so take it with whatever grain of salt you need. This from, what is this, the end of last week? December 2nd. Headline here, it was intriguing. Feds could release, quote, alternative Mueller report soon. I knew that they were unredacting a lot of it, but I'm not certain what this is about. Let's find out before it becomes big news. And then you can say, I knew it when. Subheader reads, primary processing of compendium mentioned in Mueller's AIDS book, a Mueller AIDS book, should be complete next month, a court filing says. And then it's enclosed in quotes there, primary processing of this compendium. Let's see what this is about. Josh Gerstein reports it for Politico. And, usually doing a fair job on most things. Here, I would say a good job even though he works for Politico. An unpublished investigative compilation, sometimes referred to as the alternative Mueller report, I've not heard that one, or about it for that matter, has been located in Justice Department files and could be released soon, according to a letter filed in federal court Thursday. Was it lost at some point? A top deputy to special counsel Robert Mueller, Andrew Weissman, revealed in a book he published last damn year, for God's sake, that the team he headed prepared a summary of all its work, apparently including details not contained in the final report that was made public in 2019. At least for posterity, I had all the team members write up an internal report memorializing everything we found, our conclusions, and the limitations on the investigation, and provided it to the other team leaders, as well as had it maintained in our files, wrote Weissman, in Where Law Ends, Inside the Mueller Investigation. Ooh, that's a very intriguing title. And it's been out for a year, and I haven't read it. The reference prompted the New York Times to submit a Freedom of Information Act request for the document in January and to follow up in July with a lawsuit in U.S. District Court in Manhattan. Lawyers from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan told Judge Catherine Polk Failla, I'm guessing at the pronunciation of that last name, Failla, in a letter on Thursday, that will be last Thursday, that officials have figured out what document Weissman was alluding to and have begun reviewing it for possible release. I'd like to see that. Since plaintiff filed its complaint, defendant has located and begun processing this record and intends to release all non-exempt portions to plaintiff once processing is complete. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Jude wrote. Defendant estimates that primary processing of the record will be complete by the end of January of 2022, at which time defendant expects to send the record to several other DOJ components for consultation. Jude did not provide an estimate of how long those consultations could take, but proposed updating the court in mid-February, or by mid-February. The pledge to process the so-called alternative Mueller report is no guarantee that what's released will contain significant new revelations. All right. The Justice Department can use a variety of exemptions to the Freedom of Information Act to shield parts of the document from disclosure, including by deeming it attorney work product or part of an internal deliberative process. Current DOJ leaders could waive those exemptions, but releasing other contents such as grand jury information could be more difficult due to legal restrictions. The group Weissman supervised in the special counsel's office was called Team M, after its primary target, former Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort. The team more directly focused on the ties between Russia and the former president, Donald Trump. And that team, former Trump, the team that focused more directly on them was Team R for Regeneron, I guess. Yeah, okay, probably Russia, but okay, different group. It's unclear whether investigative teams other than Weissman's also prepared compilations that were not contained in Mueller's final report, but I'd be very interested to see what's in those. So just alerting you to the fact that maybe by about mid-February we might see something like that, and you will say, oh yeah, I remember that. I heard about it on Kagro in the morning. Who heard about it from Politico? You'll know that in the background, but you probably won't tell people that part. Okay, make it seem like we did it. Sure, everyone will believe that. All right, let's see. Why not this one? We'll see if we can make it fit. The reading time estimates that come along with these things in Pocket are sometimes a little ambitious, but let's see. I put this aside. I saw it mentioned yesterday. Now there's a write-up over at TPM. Matt Schuham writes for TPM, and yeah, looks like they'll let us read it and everything. Ben Ginsberg issues warning to fellow Republicans, he's a Republican, about law governing electoral count. Oh, gee, I can't believe they've actually taken notice of this now. The Republican election lawyer, Ben Ginsberg, is calling on congressional Republicans now, to update the law that Donald Trump tried to manipulate to steal a second term. It's the Electoral Count Act, of course, and you've heard plenty about it on this show. And it governs how electoral college votes are tallied, and it's vulnerable, he says, to partisan attacks. Gee whiz. As legal observers and Democrats have been saying for months. On Sunday, Ginsburg argued that the 1887 law's vague wording and application could be bad news for his own party. I guess he still considers himself a Republican. Republicans should not deceive themselves by thinking the current state of this law automatically works to their advantage, he wrote in National Review. While many of them used it offensively on January 6, 2021, they did so because they were trailing in the Electoral College votes. Vice President Mike Pence resisted Trump's efforts, of course, to insert himself into the Electoral College vote counting process in 2020, despite Trump and others' work to exploit the Electoral Count Act to Trump's advantage. Ginsburg argued that the shoe could soon be on the other foot. For starters, a Democratic vice president will be presiding over the Senate when the Electoral College votes are opened, he wrote, referring, of course, to the Bluetoothless Kamala Harris. Suppose Trump runs again and wins. Now, suppose Vice President Harris believes that Trump's re-election represents an existential threat to the country and does what Trump couldn't persuade Mike Pence to do. I guess that could happen. Other Republicans calling for changes to the Electoral Count Act have used similar arguments. They could have Vice President Harris sitting there using the same kind of arguments to challenge the results of the next election. Zach Wamp, a former Republican congressman from Tennessee and co-chair of Issue 1's Reformers Caucus, I don't know what Issue 1 is even, told TPM last month. I don't know if it works out all that well for them to do such a plan, but I guess it's there. And I guess it would be in the spirit of borrowing their constitutional option plans for dealing with the filibuster. Representative Liz Cheney, vice chair of the January 6th committee, told the New York Times Thursday that the 1887 Electoral Count Act is directly at issue and that the committee would be recommending changes to the law. That's nice. Ginsburg is perhaps best known for his work representing the George W. Bush campaign during the 2000 Florida recount. But since last year, he's frequently challenged Trump and other Republicans' baseless claims of widespread voter fraud. He also filed a friend of the court brief in November of 2020 defending the votes of tens of thousands of Texans who'd voted at drive-through polling places and whose votes Texas Republicans wanted to cancel. In September, Ginsburg and the Democratic election lawyer Bob Bauer advertised a pro bono legal service for election administrators. In National Review, Ginsburg laid out a series of points that Congress should define clearly, including the vice president's role, whether the threshold for objecting to electors should be increased to more than one member from each chamber, and grounds for congressional objections to electors so that only questions of fraud or bribery meet the threshold and disagreement with the popular vote results does not. That seems like a sensible type of reform, although I don't know whether fraud and bribery are broad enough to encompass all the problems that you might encounter with these things. Neither Donald Trump nor members of either party can accurately predict what will be to their advantage the next time the ECA becomes crucially relevant, he wrote. Providing clarity would be in the nation's interest. The time to act is now. So I guess that means we won't be seeing anything happening anytime soon. But there you have it. Boom! He has said it. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. It's not a big boom. I say it facetiously. These are all things, of course, that have been pointed out in the past. Armando has made a hobby of study and attacks on the Electoral Count Act, although he's made attacks on its constitutionality to begin with. But yes, some reform is probably in order. No surprises there, but at least, now you know, on the record, Ben Ginsburg says Republicans should have an interest in reforming this thing. We'll see whether they really come about and do anything about it at all. All right, let's see. Still hanging out there. Let's see. I don't know. I feel like there's an awful lot of writing out there that kind of firms up what we all think we know about the efforts to steal the election. And I say here, let's see, I've got in front of me, just so you know who's writing about it and how. Jamel Bowie writing in the New York Times from a couple of days ago, the Trump conspiracy is hiding in plain sight. Feels like something I might enjoy reading, but I don't know if it informs us in any way at this point. Also from New York Magazine, Ed Kilgore writing, state legislatures are still the key to... Pardon me, I lost it in the middle there. State legislatures are still the key to Trump's election coup efforts. That too, I feel like, yes, but I enjoy reading it. And then, of course, a thing I mentioned yesterday and didn't get through reading from The Atlantic, Barton Gellman's Trump's next coup has already begun. And that alongside, I didn't finish reading, even though we discussed to some extent the story of the Department of Defense Inspector General report being basically purposefully incomplete so that it ends up whitewashing the events of January 6th. Remember again the headline, Absolute Liars. Ex-DC Guard official says generals lied to Congress about January 6th. Then the Mother Jones piece, Whose piece is this? Ari Berman. New evidence suggests Trump DOJ official, Jeffrey Clark here, conspired with the White House to overturn 2020 elections. But yes, we know that. I'm not certain what the new evidence is. But I don't know. Let's see. Oh, yes. You know what? Let me read this one because, well, the headline says there's new evidence. And he's right. There is. How long is the piece? And can I just jump to, you know what? It's not very long, so we can let a actual focused narrative tell the story rather than my trying to recall from memory what the new evidence is. Ari Berman makes short work of it here. Let's see. Jeffrey Clark, the Assistant Attorney General in the Justice Department under Trump, played a key role in Trump's conspiracy to overturn the election. He takes the time to explain to you that it's the 2020 election. Not me. I'm not going to waste time on that. A new evidence obtained by the House committee investigating the January 6th insurrection suggests he was working more closely with the White House than was previously known. In late December of 2020, Clark drafted a letter that he wanted the Justice Department's leadership to send to election officials in Georgia, falsely stating that, quote, the Department of Justice is investigating various irregularities in the 2020 election for President of the United States, yes, of the United States, and recommending that Georgia's legislature convene to overturn Joe Biden's victory in the state. When DOJ leadership refused to send the letter, Trump considered replacing acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen, yes, that's right, Jeffrey, okay, with Clark. He backed down at the last minute, but Clark's maneuvering at the Justice Department amounted to an unprecedented attempt at interference in the 2020 election, right? The House Select Committee investigating the January 6th insurrection voted on Wednesday to hold Clark in contempt of Congress for refusing to answer the committee's question, yes. Among the key questions the committee wants answered, to what extent did Clark coordinate his election subversion letter with the White House? I also wanted to ask him about metadata in that draft letter. This is what I wanted to get to. This is a quote from, I'm going to jump ahead and find out who it was. What? Why isn't it saying this? Let's see. But who's I? Who am I talking to here? It doesn't say. All right, well, let me just keep reading. It's a quote. I also wanted to ask him about metadata in that draft letter. This is the important part, that indicates some involvement with the White House Communications Agency in the drafting or preparation of that letter. The January 6th committee's chief counsel, there we are, he's just unnamed. Does anybody know who he is? His name is out there. I should know it, I guess, but I don't. But at any rate, there it is. I also wanted to ask him about metadata in the draft letter that indicates that the White House had a hand in drafting it. That's new. That's according to the chief counsel, who said at the November 5th deposition for Clark, which was first reported by Rachel Maddow on Friday night. So it took some time to get that news out there. Here's the embedded tweet about it from the Maddow blog. Breaking: the January 6th committee finds White House metadata on Jeffrey Clark's letter, pushing Georgia to overturn Trump's election law. So it wasn't something that originated with Jeff Clark, or at least not entirely. This suggests that the White House may have played a role in crafting Clark's letter, which was drafted shortly before Trump called Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger on January 2nd, 2021, and told him to, quote, find 11,780 votes to overturn Biden's victory in the state, a call that is now under criminal investigation by the district attorney in Fulton County, Georgia. Clark was expected to plead the fifth, a possible acknowledgement of having knowledge of criminal activity. That's a little dirty there, Ari, but okay. In response to the January 6th committee's subpoena during a scheduled deposition on Saturday, but due to a medical condition, the meeting has been postponed until December 16th. So what are we now? 9 days away from the rescheduled meeting. By the way, Ari's conclusion is permissible for a jury, a finder of fact in a trial, to take that sort of conclusion away from invoking the Fifth Amendment. But you'll all remember that, I guess, for our pure civil libertarians, you might say, hey, you're innocent until proven guilty. He has provided no testimony that would lead us to believe that he is in fact guilty, and it is his right to remain silent, and we shouldn't read anything into it. But you can. It's allowed. And Ari's done it. So there you go. And I don't think he's wrong either. Anyway, that is very interesting. It feels like underwhelming. I would have maybe tried to, I don't know what else you could say about it though, but I would try to develop the article around the fact that, again, what does this mean? White House metadata on the letter. It means that one, Jeffrey Clark, like if you're wondering what would make this guy so audaciously approach the White House and say, I can do this, I can save the Trump presidency, I can throw out the election results in favor of Joe Biden, reinstall Donald Trump as president, and if you let me do it, or if the DOJ won't do it, you can fire everybody and replace everybody with me, and I'll be the acting, I guess, Attorney General, and I'll do this whole thing for you. I mean, it's not beyond understanding that a person who might have come up with this information or this theory might say, yeah, Donald Trump's White House is exactly the sort of White House that would go in for something like this. But it does seem rather audacious. And people did say it was kind of out of character. People who knew Jeffrey Clark. That he would thrust himself to the forefront like that seemed out of keeping. But it wouldn't be out of keeping if you were a Trump loyalist in the, mid-upper ranks in the DOJ. If you had been told, look, the White House wants to do this. In fact, have a look at this draft letter that we've crafted. I would like you to take it and put your name on it. And if you will say, I, over at the DOJ, and maybe some other people over at the DOJ agree with me, put this thing together, urging the White House to fight on so that it didn't look like the White House was coming up with this stuff, we'll consider firing everybody and making you the acting Attorney General. That makes a little bit more sense, even though I don't know yet whether the metadata indicates that the earliest draft of the letter came from the White House or whether Jeff Clark, it's still possible, may have drafted something, shared it with the White House, they sent back notes, or maybe they sent back nothing. They just opened the file, read it, and then sent it back and said, yeah, sure, go ahead and do it, or said nothing at all. I don't know what the metadata says the White House did on it. The other thing I have, but there's no mention of it in this article, and I haven't seen any mainstream news media writing about it. Let me see if I can find this thing. One of the tweets of our sometime informant friend on Twitter, Der Wouter, right? And I've frequently said he's very often way out ahead of everybody else. Sometimes proven right, sometimes not, but always way out ahead of where the mainstream is. But he had a particular comment about the White House Communications Agency, which I don't know anything about, but this is the sort of thing that, I don't know, it sounds truthy, and I guess we should check into it and see whether anybody else follows up in reporting about it. Back on December 2nd, he talks about this thing quite a lot. Actually, as I'm looking at things, I should sort them by latest, because I think for quite some time, just checking his Twitter handle and White House Communications Agency, he mentions it for the first time in March of 2017, though I'm not certain in what context. But of late, he had made mention on December 2nd of the fact that if the White House Communications Agency, and this was something he was sending to Marcy Wheeler, Empty Wheel. So, I don't know, I should follow up and see what she thinks of this. If the White House Communications Agency appears in the metadata, that means White House tech assistants were used to prepare the documents. And that the WHCA, White House Communications Agency, according to him, is a military organization. He notes parenthetically here, part of DISA, or DISA, D-I-S-A, which I don't know what that is. Defense Intelligence, maybe Defense, D-I-S-A. I have no idea what that is. We should look it up. They, he says, provide high-tech IT to the White House on the road, the jets and helicopters, and to senior staff and secure comms. So it's interesting that the White House Communications Agency, it isn't the press office, it isn't, a public-facing part of the White House at all. DISA is Defense Information Systems Agency. But it sounds like what he's saying is that the White House Communications Agency, is, like he says, one, a military organization, and two, something that I guess is the people in charge of providing secure communications equipment and systems so that top White House staffers can have secure communications with the rest of the government while they're not at the White House, which is an interesting name for the group. Of course, it should be the not at the White House Communications Agency, but under the umbrella of the White House, but so that they can do things securely from elsewhere. So that may mean that it might end up meaning nothing more than that the document was at least opened and reviewed. I don't know how metadata works in that sense, whether it records who's opening it with, like with editor access to the thing, if you're using like Google Documents or something similar, right? But that somebody may have reviewed the document for the White House, but it would have to be a senior staffer. That's something worth noting, and probably doing so while out on the road, which, is interesting all by itself, I guess. So anyway, what other things does he mention about this? On December 4th, Wooter is talking about an Eric Garland tweet about this. Eric Garland was saying, "This is why committing treason with computers while a moron is so hard. That metadata likely shows who at the White House contributed changes to the document, which would prove direct complicity in trying to overthrow the election." This Eric Garland mentions in connection, I guess, with the Maddow blog tweet about this subject. Wooter has added to this, "It's especially easy to track down metadata from the special IT infrastructure and assets of the White House Communications Agency, which is actually a military unit. Few White House staff get WHCA assets. Happy hunting. You can also FOIA WHCA, that is the Freedom of Information Act, and DISA, so maybe people will be undertaking that project as well." By the way, the earlier references to White House Communications Agency from Wooter date back to April 5th at the soonest. What is this? It's typical for the White House Communications Agency to install its own proprietary telecom and data lines to discourage the use of a hotel's POTS, I don't know even what that is, and Wi-Fi. Interesting. What is that all about? He's responding to somebody here, Mary Pat Flynn, who had tweeted back in December of 2019. Any concerns regarding Cloud for WI? I don't know what that's about, as their clients include Trump Organization, Moscow City Government, and Russian-sanctioned banks. Interesting. What are we even talking about here? This goes back to an April David Farenthold tweet. New documents show that while Trump was trying to overturn the election in December, he was still charging the Secret Service $396.15 a night for their hotel rooms at Mar-a-Lago. Very interesting as well. By spending 8 nights at the club over Christmas, Trump brought himself another $15,846 from taxpayers. And he includes here, some photos of the bills. And then Mary Pat Flynn said that hope that the Secret Service didn't use the Wi-Fi at Mar-a-Lago, noting that in December of 2019, there was some weird problem with the Wi-Fi at Mar-a-Lago, and that the company that provides Wi-Fi there, I guess, also does the Moscow city government. That is kind of weird. Wooter at that point was saying that typically White House Communications Agency will install its own proprietary data lines and discourage the use of a hotel's Wi-Fi, including, I guess, Mar-a-Lago. So we'll see about whether that was ever the case. But what is Mary Pat talking about here? About this, again, goes back to December of 2019. Trump naming Giuliani his informal cybersecurity advisor, according to Greg O'Lear here, who says precisely because his day one priority was to realign U.S. cybersecurity policy with Russia. Every meeting Trump and Putin ever had has been on the topic of security cooperation. So, dates back a ways. Anyway, I'll include all of that stuff in our roundup so that we can poke around and see if anything comes of it, and hope it comes to some fruition later on so that we can all say, again, we read about it here on the air. All right, let's see. Other things to share before our break. Oh, probably now would be a good time for me to check in over at Daily Kos to see what's up with Joan and what she's been writing about in the last couple of days so that I have some inkling of what she'll be sharing with us later, although it's always best to let her do the talking about it. But I would like to at least have things open so I'm clear on what she's been talking about in the last couple of days. Let's see. Anything else that we should squeeze in before she gets here, either of interest perhaps to her or things that we can take off the table so that she can concentrate on what's actually important? Let's see. Just scanning the last couple of days. Yeah. Well, maybe. Let's see. That definitely of some interest, I guess. We should note for the record, at the very least, something I saved from a couple of days ago when Laura Rosen was tweeting and writing about it, saying, new from me back on December 3rd, back to square one almost. That's the quote about Iran talks ending in Vienna with no apparent progress. Her Substack newsletter about the state of our negotiations, I guess, in getting back on track for nuclear non-proliferation discussions and agreements with Iran. The fact that that needs to be redone ought to be put back on the table. And I guess I included that after having mentioned but never having actually read the Haaretz article. Maybe that's something we can talk to Greg about, because I think he might actually subscribe to Haaretz, when they were reporting the other day that, I guess, Netanyahu, or officials from the Netanyahu government, the Netanyahu cabinet, I guess, discussing the fact that nothing was never what it seemed, and nothing came of their bluster about withdrawing from the Iran agreement, that of course it ended up, I mean, I guess everybody knew it was going to, but this, for them to acknowledge that they actually made things worse through their policy, was something of interest at the very least. Okay, let's see. Other items of interest here that I really wanted to get on the record. Why don't we try this one, and then we'll read this one into the break. Charlie Savage, a couple of days ago, screaming into the wind, I guess, but worth doing. You may have seen over the past couple of weeks the movement on among the right wing. They've always been trying to do this, but I guess they now think that they have some wind in their sails, discrediting of the Steele Dossier, and I guess arrests or charges filed in the John Durham investigation, though they don't seem to be leading anywhere in particular. The right certainly, and I think increasingly the media that cover them, the mainstream media, not the right-wing media, conceding the right-wing construct that this investigation and these charges, though they won't lead to very much, undercut the Steele Dossier enough that they can now say, see, we told you the whole time that Trump-Russia, the whole Russia connection was a hoax. They've been hoping everybody would believe that for years. It's never quite worked. But if you're going to read somebody pushing back on that, it might as well be Charlie Savage. Why the discredited dossier, discredited as it is, does not undercut the Russia investigation. Subheader, Donald J. Trump and his backers say revelations about the Steele Dossier show the Russia investigation was a hoax. That is not what the facts indicate. Tell us about it, Charlie. Well, he did so on December 1st. Former President Donald J. Trump and his allies have stepped up an effort to conflate the so-called Steele Dossier with the Russia investigation following the indictment of a researcher for the document on charges that he lied to the FBI about some of its sources. Although, as you know, from the case of notorious spy Mike Flynn, lying to the FBI is not even a serious crime anymore. you can be totally pardoned for it and don't worry about it. So we shouldn't take that very seriously. Trump and his supporters have long sought to use the flaws of the dossier to discredit the investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election, which is a different thing, is what we're being told here. And we knew that, but it bears repeating. But they've long sought to use those flaws to discredit the whole investigation and the nature of numerous links between Russia and the Trump campaign as a hoax. But the available evidence indicates that the dossier was largely tangential to the Russia investigation. Here is a look at the facts. That sounds like fun. What is, or what was, the Steele Dossier? Chopped ham? No, it's chopped steak. And A1, what goes better with steak than A1? Oh my God. Well, back in 1980s commercial mode. What is the Steele Dossier? I could have gone with positraction route on that one. What is positraction? Well, it's a series of memos about purported Trump-Russia links written by Christopher Steele, a former British intelligence agent, during the 2016 campaign. It cited unnamed sources who claimed there was a well-developed conspiracy of coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russian government, and that Russia had a blackmail tape of Mr. Trump with prostitutes. A P tape. He dignifies it here. In addition to giving his memos to his client, Mr. Steele gave some to the FBI and to reporters. BuzzFeed published 35 pages of it in January of 2017. Many things that were not immediately apparent about the dossier have since become clearer. It grew out of a political opposition research effort to dig up information about Trump funded by Hillary Clinton's campaign and the Democratic Party. It wasn't founded by them. In fact, there wasn't evidence that it was originally a Republican rivals effort that once the Republican rivals fizzled in the primaries was then offered to Hillary Clinton and the Democrats, and they took them up on it. Their law firm, Perkins Coie, contracted with a research firm called Fusion GPS, which subcontracted research about Trump business dealings in Russia to Mr. Steele. Steele, in turn, hired Igor Danchenko, the recently indicted researcher, to canvass for information from people he knew, including in Europe and Russia. Now, what was the Russia investigation? Different thing. That was a counterintelligence and criminal inquiry into the Russian operation to manipulate the 2016 presidential election by hacking and anonymously dumping Democratic emails, and by spreading propaganda using fake accounts on American social media platforms. The scrutiny of Russia's activities included examining the nature of links between Trump campaign associates and Russians to see if there was any coordination. The FBI launched the investigation in July of 2016, and a special counsel, Robert Mueller, you know him, eventually took over. His March 2019 report detailed numerous links between the Russian government and the Trump campaign and established that the Russian government perceived it would benefit from a Trump presidency and worked to secure that outcome, and that the campaign expected it would benefit electorally from information stolen and released through Russian efforts. He did not charge any Trump associate with any criminal conspiracy in that respect. Not connected to that. Was the dossier a reliable source of information? No. That's Charlie's conclusion here. It has become clear over time that its sourcing was thin and sketchy. No corroborating evidence has emerged in intervening years to support many of the specific claims of the dossier, and government investigators determined that one key allegation, that Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen, had met with Russian officials in Prague during the campaign, was false. As you all saw a picture of his passport cover, so there you go. But other things, I think, proved that. When the FBI interviewed Mr. Danchenko in 2017, he told the Bureau that he thought the tenor of the dossier was more conclusive than was justified. For example, Mr. Danchenko portrayed the blackmail tape story as rumors and speculation that he was not able to confirm. He also said a key source had called him without identifying himself and that he had guessed at the source's identity. The indictment accuses Mr. Danchenko of lying about that call and of concealing that a Democratic Party-linked public relations executive was his source for a claim about Mr. Trump's campaign office politics. Okay, That's of some interest there. Did the FBI open the investigation because of the dossier? No. Mr. Trump and his allies have insinuated that the FBI based the Russia investigation on the dossier, but when counterintelligence agents launched the effort in July 30th, 2016, they did not yet know about the dossier. An Inspector General report established that Steele's reports reached that counterintelligence team on September 19th, 2016. The basis for the investigation was instead that WikiLeaks had disrupted the DNC, the convention, by releasing those Democratic emails.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan McCarter is here and ready to roll. I didn't want to leave you hanging with the rest of the Charlie Savage thing, but because he's a good writer, there's all kinds of details, and you should read it so that you know what you're talking about if you find yourself in an argument over this for whatever reason. But because he's so organized, he makes it easy to do it as a quick series of questions and answers in case there were any lingering questions. So we'll just do it that way. As we left with it, there was, did the FBI, was the dossier a reliable source of information? Ultimately, he says no. Did the FBI open the investigation that Trump complains of because of the dossier? No. The timeline doesn't work out. That we got out. The last remaining questions, did the FBI take any investigative steps based on the dossier? Well, okay, yes. They did, in fact, take the dossier seriously based on Steele's reputation and did use some of it without independent verification for a narrow purpose that led ultimately to a dead end and became a political debacle. But generally speaking, the important takeaway from this is, no, they didn't always regard it as a serious source of information. They took it with a grain of salt, investigated, and found, ultimately, most of the conclusions in here are not worth dealing with, but it's okay since we were also investigating other things. We had this investigation open before we ever heard of the dossier. We need to pursue those things, and they did. Did investigators rely on the dossier for their findings in that investigation? No, they didn't. So there you have it. That's the one-word answer that you need to know. More detail about that available in the piece. Did Mueller rely on the dossier for any of his criminal charges? Well, they were few and far between anyway, as it was, but the answer there also, no. Nobody faced any criminal charges based on anything that came solely out of the dossier. What was the main impact of the dossier? Beyond its narrow role in facilitating the FBI's wiretap of Carter Page, that's the dead end, the dossier's publication had the broader consequence of amplifying an atmosphere of suspicion about Mr. Trump. But believe me, that was coming anyway. He exists in a cloud of suspicion at all times, so that didn't have much to do with it. So there you go, just in terms of the quick questions and answers. I will include it in the roundup. You can read the details on those things if you feel like feeding the trolls at any point about that stuff. And now, the decks are clear, so Joan can take up the conversation from here. There are other things going on besides this. But anyway, felt like I should fill you in on those and a couple other things. And other than the weather, which is the only thing I got to chat with Joan about during the break, it's turned cold. It snowed yesterday, didn't stick, but we may even have some snow around here, which is a little early tomorrow. But boy, the weather was warm yesterday, turned cold, and one of my sons plus about half the school system are home with sore throats, not related to COVID. So we have to go through that again. But
you're positive it's not related to COVID?
Well, we're going today to take a look at this, but this looks a lot more like strep than anything else. So now the big question is whether the urgent care people think that you ought to also test for COVID while you're there or not. We'll see what their recommendation is. This will be an interesting turning point in the pandemic if the doctors are now like, it's strep and that's enough. Don't worry about that.
But with Omicron, I doubt it.
Right. Well, we'll see.
Well, good luck to you.
Yes, thanks.
And your child.
Right. I hope we don't spread this around much, but I think we were a little late with getting the humidifiers up and running, too. So, bad news for us there. Anyway, that's not national news, but it feels like a good chat.
It's always good to check in.
Yeah, right. You don't know how things are going for everybody. But okay, there is national news. There must be, because it's a nation and it has news. What the hell's going
on? We did not have a government shutdown.
Right. You correctly predicted how that would go. And
I didn't know how they would get there, and how they got there was rather ridiculous and circuitous, but they got there.
Yeah, right. Okay. So, I mean, you read the situation correctly and even warned us that it's certainly possible that a few of the nut bars will try to come up with something weird to complain about. And they did. They fulfilled the prophecy.
The totally predictable Mike Lee, Ted Cruz, Roger Marshall group.
Axis,
Marshall's new to the crowd, but it's going to be him or Tuberville.
He falls in with them.
They wanted to end the vaccine mandate. They wanted to defund President Biden's vaccine mandate for large private employers.
Okay. I thought we were told that yelling about defunding things was bad, but only the things that I guess protesters yell about defunding, not senators.
And mandates. Mandates remain bad.
Oh, okay. Well, they.
Because remember, it was the insurance mandate, the private insurance mandate that had everybody all for so many years worked up about the Affordable Care Act.
Why, there could be broccoli mandates.
Yes.
It could even happen. Well, that didn't work out. Not only do we not have the broccoli mandate, but the lie was so outrageous that he died. So, you just have to be careful.
Well, the mandate was repealed. The mandate's gone.
Okay. And so therefore, he gave his life to save us all from broccoli. He's a hero.
He just moved to a new mandate.
Right.
A vaccine mandate, which is even more horrible because keep your hands off my body.
Right. True. Okay.
My body, my choice.
I don't know. They do seem to adopt weird parts of the language from the protest crowd that they don't like. But, well, we give and take and borrow one another's language all the time. But they've been screaming about mandates for a long time. Unfunded mandates, then the insurance mandate, now the mask mandates and vaccine mandates. I guess that's
somehow
for them.
Carry a child to term even if you don't want to. Somehow
that's a mandate they like.
Remain a mandate.
Yeah.
It's curious.
I don't know. They have selective ideas about things like that. I guess it's a mandate if you're making me do it. If you're making her do it, whatever. Right. Might not be a bad thing.
So, life. Yeah.
Right. The little.
So anyway, how they got around this, because Mitch McConnell and most Republicans, probably all but those three, and a handful in the House, did not want a government shutdown because government shutdowns don't work well for them.
That's really true. They keep bringing them up.
The most annoying part of it was having Joe Manchin be kind of maybe sort of flirting with helping them shut down the government over the mandate.
Well, all right. I said
After it was all worked out, Manchin, of course, came out and said, no, I would never, ever shut down the government over something like this. I want a separate vote on the vaccine mandate. But that didn't happen until after we had resolution on how they were going to deal with this. When it was still possible, he was holding out as the 51st vote on an amendment to defund President Biden's private company vaccination mandate.
Yeah, all right. How much funding is there involved in that anyway? Probably not too much, but...
Probably not too much, but, they had to do something. So the solution they ended up, it was very cowardly, but effective.
Yeah.
They just sent 2 Republicans away.
That's it? That's all it took?
Yeah. Haggerty left to go watch his kid play in his last high school football game.
That's nice.
And I don't know why Thune left. Thune left to do something. So
I saw Haggerty leave. I thought we were done. That was it.
They took away any possibility of the amendment actually passing by having their members go away, because the insistence was it had to be a simple majority amendment.
Oh, all right. Well, whatever it takes, I guess. I mean,
it worked.
Okay.
Worked.
They got to save
and
face
now
somehow.
We're bending over backwards trying to figure out a way to raise the debt ceiling without Republicans having to vote to raise the debt ceiling. Going through ridiculous machinations to try to make this happen that may or may not involve the National Defense Authorization Act.
Okay. Yeah, well, I
almost may or may not allowing a simple majority vote. One time only.
Really?
This isn't working the filibuster. It'll only happen this one time to hike the debt ceiling.
All right. So that's an odd thing to do. I mean, are they just agreeing?
It's not really clear how they're doing it. It looks as though what they're going to try to do is attach some language saying this time only the Senate can have a vote to raise the debt ceiling with a simple majority vote into the National Defense Bill in the House. And, you can do almost anything with words.
I guess. What?
But this is going to be kind of hard. There were 38 Democrats who voted against the National Defense Authorization last time around because they hate it because it's bloated and because they were giving $24 billion to the Pentagon that the Pentagon didn't even ask for, in addition to everything else. So they had to have Republicans make up those votes. And, of course, it's the defense bill, so, of course, Republicans are going to vote for it. But those same Republicans don't want to hike the debt ceiling. They don't want their name attached to an increase in the debt ceiling. Even though everybody knows that is not increasing the deficit. It's not future money that they're spending. It's paying the bills that they've actually accrued to date.
Right. So we know that. They don't like to acknowledge it, but it's true. They think that voting for a defense bill is enough cover for them, or barely enough, or they're willing to accept it.
That's what leadership is kind of hoping. It's still not at all clear that it's going to work. What might happen in the House is a standalone vote that tells them that the Senate can raise the debt ceiling with just 51 votes. But only in this specific instance.
But they actually committed that to writing as opposed to saying, well, we'll all agree not to object to proceeding.
Right. And there's no clarity that there will actually be 60 votes to advance the law that tells them they can pass the debt ceiling with just 51 votes. So that's why they're trying to tie it to the Defense Authorization Act, because it must pass and because Republicans are going to pass it.
I may have to read about this.
Yes, it's It's hairy.
Yeah. Interesting that they agreed to. I mean, since they could have just said, well, why don't we just agree? If we agree among ourselves not to bring up any objections, then it should fly through. But I don't know if I would trust Ted Cruz in particular
Ted Cruz,
with that.
Roger Marshall.
Well, I guess now we have to look out for him. I don't know. It's never been on my radar before. But Ted Cruz and I guess Rand Paul occasionally.
And Rand Paul.
Types of people.
Particularly when it comes to deficit kind of stuff with Rand Paul.
Who just, I either won't raise an objection in a conference meeting about it, but then freelance object on the floor, which, you can't control. It only takes one to make an objection, and that creates a problem for everybody, and then they got to have a vote. And when it comes to a vote, people start defecting from the agreement, but it just starts with one person saying no. So I guess if they just authorize a one-time exception, but boy, does that open the door to any number of one-time exceptions.
Well, I think it shows you one aspect of it. It shows you that McConnell really is kind of concerned that they're going to finally pull the plug on at least this one thing.
Yeah.
And end the filibuster for these votes.
That's probably
one
how
more
he convinced
filibuster
people to
carve
do it.
out.
Yeah.
And once you have one filibuster carve out, how many more are you going to end up with, particularly as Schumer is continuing to push voting rights and everything else. So that could be why McConnell is, by all appearances, actively working with Schumer to try to figure out how to do this. But at the same time, he has this letter that he sent in a fit of pique to Biden back in October saying, no way are we ever doing this again. Republicans are not going to ever help you raise the debt ceiling ever, ever, ever again. Because he got so much backlash from caving back in October and allowing it to happen, even though it was only this stupid 3-month timeline. So he's got to balance that. The threat that he made in October with really not wanting to have this on his head if there's a default. And increase the possibility that Democrats just get fed up and say, okay, we can't do the filibuster thing.
Well, that's interesting. We'll have to see whether this model gets replicated on anything else in the future. But, I mean, I guess this was a good candidate for it in that he doesn't really want to have the shutdown or doesn't want to have the default in a way. So it wouldn't necessarily work for voting rights, which he actively does want to prevent from passing and doesn't, collapse the world markets. Not quickly enough, anyway, for it to be put on his head. And when it collapses the United States and takes the world market with it, he can say, that's someone else's fault. Or he might even be retired by that point. So, who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah. Oh, but that's interesting.
It kind of shows, I don't know, maybe Manchin isn't being as helpful to them as it appears. I don't know. I really wish I knew what was going on with all of this and why McConnell is all of a sudden being so helpful. And even, it's not really in his interest to deal with this week, although by all appearances they're going to. The Treasury has set a deadline of December 15th, although others looking at the situation think probably we've got until mid-January before we actually hit the ceiling. But Treasury is not backing away from saying, nope, it's got to be done by December 15th.
All right. Well, they want it done ASAP. No point in...
Yeah. And the congressional leadership wants it this week.
Okay.
So despite the fact that they have a whole 8 days to do it, they're trying to get it done now. So the House has today on its schedule possible votes on defense authorization and possible votes on debt ceiling, although it's all just possible. The Senate is churning through some nominations, including Jessica Rosenworcel at FCC, so that's good news.
Okay,
They're going to get that one in on time.
Good.
So, little
That's
bit of a
helpful.
holding pattern today while they try to figure out this very, very tricky maneuvering.
Yeah, and I
Get
guess
it
anytime
done.
they have 8 days, there's the danger they'll take it. But
Yeah.
I guess they want to get. Were they planning on recess as soon as it's done?
As soon as Monday.
As soon as so maybe that's it.
They might be trying to actually push that recess to happen. Get this done, and then get Manchin to say absolutely he will not vote on budget reconciliation
You won't.
this week.
Oh, okay.
And force the recess to happen, and force them to bring it into January. I don't know if Manchin would do that. Here we go again with not knowing what Manchin is thinking they're going to do.
Okay.
Because
Presumably he
Schumer
wants
keeps
out.
saying we're going to have this done. We're going to have budget reconciliation on Build Back Better done before we leave for Christmas. Here.
Okay.
He also says we're going to do voting rights
Well,
before Christmas.
that feels like a stretch, but so does reconciliation. But so they both do.
Right now they've got all of, I think as of yesterday midday, 8 of the 12 committees had their stuff before the Senate Parliamentarian and were ready to send it for the CBO. Okay. So 8 of the 12 committees have pretty much finalized text. But that left the big ones being finance, which has to do all of the revenue for it, and health, education, labor, and pensions, which has the majority of the provisions. Those were the 2 biggies, and they weren't ready yet.
Well, yeah, all right. That's I guess that takes the air out of the gee, 8 of the 12 already. They all had one-liners. But,
right.
Okay. I'm glad they're done. It would be a shame for it to be hung up on those things. But all right, so there's a lot of work to be done, and unlikely it doesn't feel like they're ready to move reconciliation. Certainly not this week. But the debt ceiling thing, I guess they could possibly get done.
I think it'll get done
one way or another. Then they could feel okay about
this
leaving.
Week? I guess I stuck my neck out on saying that there would be a government shutdown, so I may as well stick my neck out and say they're going to deal with debt ceiling this week.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, and I guess I could see
Which
it working
would be
out
nice
that
for
way.
my coworkers, because I'm taking next week off.
Yes, so then they won't have to cover it and learn what the hell's going on very quickly.
Yes.
That would be helpful.
It does get rather weedy, so it helps to have
You'll be
dealt
getting
with
texts
it
on your vacation.
decade.
What is this? Hold on a second. I'll text you back a link to CRS. Go read this. Well, I guess it's possible. I could see them, if they could get the debt ceiling taken care of on the early side and get it done this week, I could see Senate types sort of say, well, as a reward to ourselves for having done our jobs on time, why don't we just leave all the rest of the work until later? We said we would get it done, but let's just not. Let's just take off and see if taking a break for the Christmas holiday changes. I don't know. Maybe Joe Manchin watches some Hallmark movies and comes back in a great mood.
The problem, of course, with that is giving either Manchin or Sinema. We're not sure where Sinema's at right now, other than saying privately, apparently, she's saying she's okay with it. Let's go. Publicly, the only thing she said is she's not sure it has to happen before Christmas.
Okay.
And hasn't definitely said she's voting for it. But privately, everybody seems to be assured that she's going to. Mm-hmm. So Sinema apparently is taken care of. But, there's always the problem. If you give them more time, they will find more things to object to.
Someone will whisper in their ear while they're home. If they're willing, you should maybe jump on it and do it.
Campaign check.
Yeah. Right. Oh, so, okay, that's a good argument for giving it a shot and just saying if you're inclined to do it and you can't go home until you finish and you've said, I might be willing to go along with this. Well, let's just get it done and then you can go home and enjoy your break, and nobody will bother you.
And that seems to be sort of the feeling among many Democratic senators who seem to be getting pretty darned sick of Joe Manchin.
Okay. Well, that can work. Holidays are big motivators for these senators. Hell, look what happened just because of Valentine's Day for Chris Coons. So, these guys really take the
Thank you for that reminder.
Hallmark holidays seriously. So, okay, I'll be interested to see, but we'll know. Well, we'll know by next Tuesday, at least, whether they're stretching it out to the end of the 8 days and cutting it close on the debt ceiling. And we'll see whether if they can clear the decks of that quickly. Well, we might be. No. You said next week is your vacation, right? Okay.
Next week is my vacation.
Yes, right. So next week I'll be saying, "Oh no, Joan's not here to say how ridiculous it is that they've stretched this out."
Depending on what they do, maybe I can pop in and talk with you about what they have or have not done.
Yeah, well, all right. We'll hope for something exciting then, and maybe helping to unravel the one-time exception thing. That seems like, I bet they would love for that to just happen and nobody really noticed, and maybe they're making it as complicated as possible so that people don't publicize what they've done. But that's weird. I'm going to read more about it. You sent me the CNN article. I'll include that for everyone else to read about this possible deal, and we'll unravel that one. Okay.
The other thing that happened is the Supreme Court blue ribbon panel that Biden put together 10 months ago has spent 10 months talking about this and apparently are ready to release their final report. We've got the final draft before the final report in which they give no recommendations.
Okay.
But apparently they did get hammered enough by serious people to say, okay, we can't say court expansion is a really bad idea and we hate it. So we're just not going to say, yeah, you should think about it.
But that's
and we're not going to give any other recommendations either.
Oh, well, then.
There's 10 months wasted and abortion in Texas over and God knows what else, another voting rights gutted bill. Yeah,
just one odd. So, did they pay these guys on the panel? I know they paid for staff for them, but talk about waste of time, but waste of money. Like, oh my God, this was the reason you were in panel, and your conclusion is we should say nothing about it, and maybe nothing about anything else either. Oh, all right.
Oh,
yeah. Seems bad.
Membership and size of the court. That's chapter 2 of the thing.
Yeah, that's it.
We do not seek to evaluate or judge the weight of any of these arguments, and the commission takes no position on the wisdom of expansion.
I guess that's better than a no. And maybe that was the issue. They were going to come down on it. And we really are a no on this, but so that we don't carry the burden of this, we'll just say we have no recommendation. But that's a no from them.
Yeah.
But it's a yes for me, so we should just... All right, well, yeah, we knew that was the case. It's just a weird way of them concluding all this. No more panels is really... I guess the conclusion. What we really learned from this, if we didn't learn what to do with the court, we learned not to do any more panels. If we hadn't already
learned the blue ribbon commissions and super committees,
yes, right,
weren't ridiculous, by now we should know that.
Yes, all right. Well, one more lesson in that long running saga, I guess. I did see interesting, renewed interest, I guess, as a result of this report in circulating. Not new discussion, but circulating old articles about jurisdiction stripping for the Supreme Court and other federal courts too, I guess, as a possible remedy, although it too, not particularly popular and not something that's been done frequently. and not something that can't be undone by a future Republican majority as well. But it's got people talking about things that possibly can be done, but I don't know. They don't need a blue ribbon commission on whether or not that can be done, but I suppose they could toss it to them and ask them if they think it's a good idea, and 10 months later they'll say, we don't know.
Right.
So,
right.
All right. Well, anyway, that's out there. I hope, though, that whatever develops in the next couple of days means that you can take a vacation undisturbed, although it would be nice to hear from you, too.
That would be very nice.
Yeah.
If I could leave and not have to look at Twitter or
that
see
would
it
be great.
span or...
Yeah.
That's my hope.
Okay. Well, we'll pull for you on that one and hope that you get away, even though it would be nice for there to be such an emergency that you felt compelled to come and visit with us again. We would always welcome that.
Figure out something by the end of the week. I'll pop in on Thursday or Friday.
Well, hell, why not? And that would be great. Otherwise, just I know you'll probably peek at Twitter anyway. So drop us a line.
It's true.
Yeah, drop us a line so that we know what's going on, or even to say, nothing special happening here. I'm going to watch some Hallmark movies and bake some stuff and hang out.
The Hallmark movies not likely, but you never know.
Okay. That's an awful stereotype I tried to force on you there. I don't know. They're on my TV, and I can't seem to stop them. So, all right. Thank you, Joan. I appreciate your time.
See you later.
And, enjoy your vacation.
Networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, so if you learn nothing else, you learn that she doesn't like the Hallmark movies. That's pretty good. And you did learn something else. Don't say we never told you anything, but if there's anything we haven't told you, you can rely on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam to fill you in on those things. I promise you, an esoteric selection of good stories we may have missed. Stay tuned.